Hello, my name's Sarah Lane and my social media moniker is Kind Motivation. And in Kind Motivation, I talk about my fitness and wellbeing journey and nutrition and all of that kind of stuff. Today, I want to talk to you about urinary tract infections, otherwise known as cystitis. And I want to talk to you about that not because I'm a qualified doctor, but because I'm actually what I would call an expert patient. So I had my first UTI when I was 16, and that's fairly common. Around a third of women will experience a UTI before the age of 24. 50% of women will get a UTI at some point in their lifetime, and around a third of women will have repeat UTIs, and 5% of women will develop what's called a chronic UTI. So if I tell you what a chronic UTI is and explain what happened to me. So in my 20s, I would say I had 2 or 3 UTIs, which were very quickly resolved by a short course of antibiotics. When I was 30, I had a kidney infection that went on for weeks. And a funny thing about that was, one of the reasons for that was I was given the right antibiotic, but I was drinking tons and tons of water. So that's like one of my number one tips is don't drink tons and tons of water when you're taking antibiotics because it dilutes it. But the net result of that was, after that severe infection, I never felt quite right again. So what that meant for me was I was almost in continuous pain all the time. Felt like I had a UTI all the time. And I, tried various things. I went to doctors. The tests didn't always show that I had a UTI. So sometimes tests would come back that I had a UTI. Sometimes they came back that I didn't have a UTI. I suffered for a really long time until I had the right treatment. So when you're talking about treatment of a UTI, my feeling is that the only treatment which will work is actually hard drugs, i.e. antibiotics. And when you have a chronic UTI, just a short course will not work for you. So you are probably going to have to take higher doses and a longer dose to get rid of that. I actually ended up taking high dose antibiotics for 3 years before I got rid of my embedded UTI. So what happens with that embedded UTI is the bug actually goes inside the cellular wall of the bladder. So it's very difficult for your immune system to deal with it, and it's very difficult for antibiotics to deal with it. And the only time you can sort of stop that is you take the antibiotics when you have an acute, or you're not having it, you're symptomatic like that. And the bugs are killed, so they can't reinfect the bladder lining again, the newer cells that are coming into the bladder lining. So I took antibiotics for a very long time. I took antibiotics on a daily basis. So the drug that worked for me was cefalexin, or cephalexin, however you want to pronounce it. I suspect for a normal UTI, they'd probably give you 2 doses of 500 milligrams a day, and I was taking up to 4 grams a day of Keflex when I was at my worst. One of the things that I would say to you is there is a lot of stuff on websites, etc., about natural treatments for UTIs, because obviously, we don't like taking antibiotics. Doctors don't like prescribing antibiotics either. And so we think we can turn to naturals and they're going to be much better for us. But the thing is with naturals is if you have a proper UTI, whether it's chronic or, a short-term one, herbals aren't going to work. So I would say to you, save your money, don't buy those. I mean, there is some research into something called Demonose, and I think Demonose, again, is probably not going to get rid of a UTI, but it might be helpful as a preventative measure. But again, I just would save your money. Just take antibiotics when you need them. And if you suffer regularly from UTIs, you always carry antibiotics with you. And if you feel an attack coming on, don't wait. Hit it hard straight away with the antibiotics that you've got with you. Okay, so as I said before, you're not getting UTIs because you're dirty. So we don't know what the cause is, but it's not because you're dirty. The bladder and the urine in the bladder is a microbiome, and you share that microbiome with your vagina. And so I would say to you, from a preventative point of view, do all the things that are good for your health and good for your gut health. And again, don't spend tons of money on supplements, but the only supplement I would say to you is take a good probiotic, especially when you're taking antibiotics and for a short period afterwards. And if you can, eat all the prebiotics and eat probiotics, just really look after your gut health, and hopefully your vaginal health and your bladder health will follow. And the other thing to say about that microbiome as well, and this is why it's so difficult to test for UTIs, is one of the most common causes of a UTI, they say, is E. coli. But E. coli has been found in the bladder microbiome of people, and it's not causing any problems at all. So so it's a real conundrum. So another thing that can sort of affect, if that can be sort of a danger point for you getting UTIs, is when estrogen's low. So is your hormone profile. So estrogen is classically low around your period. So that might be a trigger for you for getting UTIs. Estrogen will be low postpartum, so after you've had a baby. Especially if you're breastfeeding, that could go on for quite a long time. And the most obvious time is perimenopause and beyond. And, there are lots of older ladies that may not have had a UTI their entire life and then really, really suffer from UTIs. And the thing about that is when the elderly get UTIs, it can become very life-threatening, and it also affects their brain. They can start to get dementia and things like that when they're sick with a UTI. So one of the things that you can do is, obviously there's HRT, but I won't talk about that today because, there's too much other stuff I want to say about that. But even if you can't take HRT, you can take vaginal estrogen. So there are lots of ways to take that. There are pessaries, there's cream, but anything that injects a bit of estrogen down there, and your bladder has loads of estrogen receptors in it. So a little bit of estrogen down below is, as I understand it, completely safe, even if you're somebody who's previously had or has estrogen sensitive cancer. So that's really worth doing. Then there's another drug which has recently been licensed for over-the-counter sale, and that's Hiprex. I think the actual chemical name for it is methenamine hypicturate, something like that, but Hiprex anyway. So you can buy that over the counter. It comes in a tablet form, and you can take that up to 3 times a day. So you could take it as a preventative. You could take, if sex is a trigger for you, you can take it after sex. Or if you have a sort of, you think you might be getting a UTI and you can't get hold of antibiotics, then doing 2 to 3 times a day with the Hiprex is a really good way of stopping that UTI getting really out of hand. So what do you do when you have a really acute infection? Imagine that you woke up next to your boyfriend, or your girlfriend woke up next to you and she's in acute pain, because it is awful when that happens, when you would literally, you can go from 0 to 60. You can just go to the bathroom and it just hits. So I would say to you, take ibuprofen, take paracetamol. You can take antacids such as Reni, that sort of thing. Anything that's going to alkalise your urine is going to help. Don't drink tons of water, but just stay well hydrated. Because if you drink too much water, again, it's going to affect your immune system and it's not going to make you feel very well. So stay well hydrated. And then the other thing is obviously hot or cold compresses, whatever works for you. So hot water bottle between your legs, or a cold compress, something that you'd use for an injury, a bag of peas, cold peas. Cold can work really well. It's counterintuitive, I know, but cold can work really well because it's anti-inflammatory. There's one other point that I want to make, where you can get that pelvic pain, where you can get that feeling like you've got a UTI, but you haven't actually got one. It's actually caused by a hypertonic pelvic floor, so a tight pelvic floor. And very often people that have had chronic pain conditions, people that have had chronic UTIs or lots of UTIs, will end up with a very tight pelvic floor. So I would say to you, doing exercises which release the pelvic floor. And I'm not going to go into too much detail again, because I think this is a huge topic and it's something that I want to talk about on another occasion. But releasing the pelvic floor is really important. And as part of that, I would say to you that when you suffer with a problem like this, intuitively you think, I don't want to have sex because this might cause a UTI, or this might cause pain, or my urethra feels inflamed. But I think if your neural pathways to your pelvic area can cause that much pain, they can also cause that much pleasure. So don't stop having sex. Don't stop touching yourself down below. Carry on doing all of that. The blood flow that you get into the area is really, really good for your immune system and keeping everything healthy. So, stopping having sex is not necessarily the answer. I mean, obviously you have to do it in a way that's comfortable for you, but it's so good for your immune system and it's so good for your well-being that I would say don't stop having sex if you can. So I think, to summarise this, I hope that I've dispelled some of the misconceptions around UTI. The most important things are that you're not dirty, you need antibiotics, you're not going to take herbals, that it can be hormone related, and don't stop having sex. Those are the main things. Okay, so thanks for listening. I really hope that was helpful. I will put in the show notes some organisations which should be really helpful to you. So there's a charity called QTIC that deals specifically to help people with chronic UTI. So I'll put the website for that in the show notes. And there's also the Artemis Clinic in London that deals specifically with people who've got chronic UTIs. It's a private clinic, but it's really worth a visit. If your GP's not being helpful, it's worth paying the money for. And a couple of other bits and pieces. Anything else I can think of, I'll put in the show notes. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that we'll talk again soon.